little pollution fact sheet that we've put together. And then after that, Vish will discuss the 20 September proposal. Okay. So it's up here on the board. It's actually very small. But okay, so in this fact sheet, we just wanted to lay out a few stats about pollution, what are the effects, and then who are the major polluters. So firstly, what is pollution? It's when harmful substances are introduced into the Earth's atmosphere, affecting the air that we breathe. The effects of air pollution, it's known to speed up the aging of lungs, puts us at high risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is the third leading cause of death in the world. Some emissions and pollution stats. So South Africa is the world's 14th largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Then we've got a little map there of 3 of the pollution hotspot areas. One of the hops there. But we've got the high-file priority area, then the Vaal Triangle, and then the Waterberg, Goianala priority area. So these are 3 hotspot areas. Looking at SASOL's emissions annually are more than the entire of the country, more than the entire country of Portugal. And then the Carbon Majors report, which we've actually got the reference at the end of this document, it lists the top 100 global fossil fuel producers from 1988 until 2015, and it's ranked total SA as 19, SASOL as 45. Then Mpumalanga is the global #1 hotspot for nitrogen dioxide emissions. And then some interesting news. On the 24th of July, 2 South African towns fell within the top 100 worst air qualities globally. Top 10 worst qualities globally. Tabazimbi, a town in Limpopo, had the second highest AQI, which is Air Quality Index. And so the index was 204, so the air quality index is ranked from 0 to 500. And between 0 to 50 is good, moderate is 50 to 100, unhealthy for sensitive groups is 101 to 150, and then 151 to 200 is unhealthy. 201 to 300, which is where both of these towns sat, is very unhealthy, and then 301 to 500 is hazardous. So we had Tabazimbi at 204, and then 4th on the list was Ermelo at 201. Air pollution in Mpumalanga is regularly higher than that in Beijing and Jakarta, 2 of the most polluted cities in the world, according to AirVisual. And then just looking at deaths from pollution, so a UK air quality expert found air pollution from Eskom coal-fired power stations kills 2,239 South Africans annually. And then we break it up: 157 from lung cancer, 1,100 from some kind of heart disease, 73 from COPD, and so on. Eskom emits 205 million tons of carbon a year. If it were a country, it would place 29th in the world, ahead of Argentina. SASOL emits 67 million tons of carbon a year. If it were a country, it would be 50th, ahead of Oman. Over 80% of South Africa's saleable coal is produced by 5 dominant companies: BHP Billiton, Energy, Coal South Africa, Anglo American Thermal Coal, Xstrata Coal, Exxaro Resources, and Sasol Mining. And then this is just a stat to show, not really a stat, but just some information. So pollution really is, the effects of pollution are really unequal. So not only are mining communities affected more, but even those people who don't have access to sufficient energy, who have to use wood and coal inside their homes, there are often a lot more deaths from indoor pollution. And if we turn the page, South Africa's oil industry, here we just list the major players, and then we show how they are ranked, some of them in the top 100 list of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So BP South Africa is one of the main players. The BP PLC is ranked 11th, the 11th largest polluter globally. Then we've got Chevron. Chevron Corp is ranked 12th. Engen Petroleum Petro SA, SASOL Oil, SASOL Limited is ranked 45th. Shell South Africa and Royal Dutch Shell is ranked 9th. And Total South Africa is ranked 19th. And there we just have an image, it's not very clear, of where the oil refineries in South Africa are. Right.
Okay, so this is a kind of prelude, it's a feed into how we should think about September 20th. Now, as we've been saying throughout the day, we've had a struggle-driven process and approach to the Climate Justice Charter, and it goes back 5 years actually. But in the course of this year, we targeted drought-affected communities and brought them into engagement with the media. We also have targeted political parties in April, critiquing them. And it's time to take the fight to those that are causing the problem. We are not a lobby group. We are not seeking to send a message and expect somebody else to bring about change. We are not a lobby group. At the same time, we are not trying to just do a crowd politics, an event, a moment. We are trying to build a movement. So every tactical choice we make and how we fight the fight has to bring us together effectively. And it's got to build for the immediate and future. Okay. Now, there have been several calls, by the way, that have come from outside of South Africa around climate action. And I said in my presentation earlier on, climate justice stroke environmental justice politics is not new in South Africa. When some of the kind of message was sent through around climate for Friday Futures, etc., Equal Education, for example, took to the streets, but it also had a critique. And its critique was that we cannot just import a call. We have got to ground it in South African conditions. We have got to make sure that a South African focus comes through when we engage in the streets and around these struggles. And we involved in the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign agree with that approach. We cannot just be switched on and switched off somewhere else outside South Africa. That's not how it's going to work. Okay? We have a history of struggle. We know where the battle lines are, and we're going to work from there to move forward. At the same time, I think what's very, very important is that a lot has been done already. So people have gone to Parliament, people have gone to the union buildings, and we haven't really put the squeeze, we haven't put the focus, the line of attack on where the real problem lies. And that is why the proposal before you is to really take the fight to those that stand behind the state. To take the fight to those that the state is being influenced by and whose interests the state is perpetuating in our society and ultimately killing us. So we're saying carbon pollution kills, climate justice now. So this is the broad slogan that we are putting forward for September 20th. As I've been saying, we need to take the fight to those that need to be exposed as killing us, as causing the problem. This is not new. SETC has been fighting this fight in the Durban area for a long time. EarthLife has been fighting this fight for a long time with Eskom and other mining-affected communities and so on. There's been a lot of work done by the mining-affected communities. Makua, again, in Mpumalanga, toxic area. One of my students did a master's on it. People can't live in Mpumalanga, okay? Particularly in Malahleni. So there are important grassroots movements and networks that have been trying to push back. But again, these have been very localized, these have been very episodic, these haven't been attempts to build a national focus. And what we are saying is let's use September 20th to put the big spotlight on these carbon polluters. Okay? We're also saying we must have two lines of attack against carbon capital. The first line of attack is that it is killing people. And just based on the data that Jane shared with us, the debate around Eskom is that does it kill 3,000 people or does it kill 1,500 people? But the bottom line is that one life lost is too many. Okay? So many people are dying from the immediate effects. There's also a whole host of respiratory problems in communities. Cancer is another problem, and a whole lot of other effects that come from this kind of pollution. There was an important victory for mine workers yesterday. It was on the news. The silicosis victory, 5 billion rands. It's not enough, but it's a powerful victory for our society. So there are generations of people that are suffering from the pollution that's happening in these pollution hotspots. So that's one line of attack, to emphasize that already carbon capital is killing us, and it's killing people in our communities. The other line of attack is that carbon capital is killing us in the medium to long term. As long as we allow them to spew out this metric tons and gigatons of carbon, we are ending our futures. It's as simple as that, and we all know that in this room. But it's two lines of attack, and it's bringing together these issues in which there's momentum on the ground. The second important objective for us is to bring together environmental and climate justice forces. For us, it's going to be this Climate Justice Charter dialogue process, where we will invite everybody who's at the front lines to engage and contribute. And that door is open. But at the same time, we do believe that in struggle, we should not be sectarian, we should not be partisan, etc. We should try and find convergence around how we fight this fight. And again, it must have a South African focus that builds the movement in South Africa so that we can continue the fight. We must also build the momentum in grassroots communities that are already at the front line. And I've alluded to this, but there have been amazing exposés that have come out over the years. But more recently, Mail and Guardian has had front page news reporting on how unlivable most of these carbon hotspots are. Johannesburg is toxic, comrades. It's very, very toxic. So another index, the Plume Index, actually shows that most of the time in Johannesburg we are breathing in poisons. Okay? So there's a lot of issues around air quality and toxicity and so on, but the media has raised some of this already. Daily Maverick has done some good work around spotlighting SASOL. And SASOL has really been in the background. Okay? We all know Eskom. We all talk Eskom. Eskom looms large because of the bailouts, etc., etc. But the one big polluter in South Africa that's getting away without any attention is SASOL. SASOL is a powerful corporation in this country, and it's a carbon polluter, and we're letting it off the hook. We are not bringing it into the national narrative, and we are not attacking it, and we need to. The other thing we want to do is keep the rolling action going, okay? So for us, we're not going to stop this year. This is a real hard struggle. And including next year, as we deepen this Climate Justice Charter process, we will be taking the fight to others within the space of carbon capital and so on. And we want to, in this process, also get more feedback from forces that converge around these actions. So yes, our focus for the national target is SASOL. Okay? And we are saying that SASOL, alongside Eskom, is one of the big carbon polluters in this country. 67 million tons of carbon annually, more than the country called Portugal. Okay, ranked 50 in the world after Oman. Okay, so it's a massive, massive carbon polluter in the country, and we are not dealing with it. We are also saying that if we are going to focus on carbon pollution as a killer, then we have to also have a framework that is flexible enough to mobilize grassroots forces wherever they are. So that means we've got to target Eskom and coal-fired power stations. We've got to target the refineries. We've got to target municipal incinerators that also produce carbon. We've got to target heavy energy users like ArcelorMittal, for example, or Score Metals, etc. We've got to target local Eskom plants. We've got to target local SASOL plants like in Secunda, like in Sasolburg. We've got to target local government offices that are failing to address the pollution challenge. And we've got to take the fight to our local round-the-corner petrol station. Because as we've been saying, as Jane has been saying, BP, Chevron, Shell, Total, Engine, all of them are amongst the top 100 carbon polluters, and they are in your neighborhood. They're literally around the corner. The target is not the workers in any of these institutions. As climate justice activists, we are building an alliance with workers and the most vulnerable and the weak and the poor. And we are saying that we want a just transition that benefits them and place their interests first and foremost in what has to happen. So keep that in mind. We are against the corporations. We are against these institutions and the fact that they are deepening the carbon-centric logic that's killing us. So what are our demands? And here we try to keep it very simple and logical. We want to change the narrative in South Africa to induce an urgency into the conversation, given the science. The science is very, very clear, comrades. It's not 12 years, okay, 12 years. Official science, 12 years. But as climate changes are kicking in, and as the scientists are beginning to comment on what's happening, etc., based on their models, the doomsday clock is showing less and less time. Let's put it that way, okay? So we want to raise the stakes, and we want to say all large-scale carbon polluters must shut down, including SASOL and Eskom. Now, of course, it might sound like an outlandish demand. You're going to ruin the economy, etc., etc. No, we need to put this demand front and center in the national discourse and use it as a moment to educate society. That these are not just national carbon polluters, they are even killing the planet, and they are here at home. Okay? And that's the powerful message we must use around this demand. The second demand is to end carbon pollution through socially owned renewable energy and clean energy public transport. Now, citizens in our country can understand this. Those that don't have energy and those that do have some energy can understand that we are saying, let's go beyond SASOL and Eskom, and here's an answer. Renewable energy, socially owned. But we're also saying public transport can make a fundamental difference to bringing down carbon emissions. And then finally, the logic of the demands are that we want a deep, just transition with systemic alternatives that benefits workers, the poor, and community. So these three demands give us an opportunity to place climate justice perspectives at the center of the national debate. Okay? So yes, shut down. Yes, there are alternatives, and yes, these alternatives have to be part of the just transition that benefit workers, the poor, and the vulnerable. And that means we can talk about all the alternatives we are developing and thinking about in the Climate Justice Charter process. So what is the content of the tactic? Do you have those masks? The content of the tactics is to raise awareness about carbon pollution and climate change. So we want to use pamphlets, posters, banners, and stickers. We do not want to engage in disruption at this stage, but we do want to engage in non-violent symbolic action. Okay? And this is very, very important. So this is the one idea we were thinking about. It's the medical mask, and we basically wear this in front of the local gas station, so we don't disrupt the workers who are filling tanks. We don't make road rage drivers angry at petrol stations and so on. But we stand there and we assemble there with our messages, with our posters, with our banners, and with our masks, and we make a point. We do the same outside SASOL's head office, corporate office in Sandton, and so on. This is symbolically a very, very powerful message to send about the debts that are there now and the debts that are coming. We're also saying that we must picket outside these sites. If it's a local petrol station, you walk around it a few times with your posters, your banners, etc., and you draw attention to this. You hand a pamphlet out to people coming to get their petrol, passers-by, etc., etc. And you're standing there with your mask and you are making a statement, a powerful symbolic statement. We're also saying that let's invite local organizations to be part of the action and to be part of the assembly. So what you are doing is an assembly outside SASOL head office, outside the local targets, whether it's the refineries, whether it's incinerators, whether it's the local petrol stations or the local government office. And so you bring as many forces as possible together. You also invite these organizations to say, well, what are the alternatives? The weakness of the left and progressive forces in the world today now is that we are not talking about alternatives. We have alternatives. We've been thinking for alternatives for over 3 decades. There are post-national liberation, post-Soviet, post-social democratic alternatives on the left in the world. And some of us have done a lot of work on it in this country. We need to bring those alternatives to the fore. Food sovereignty is one of them. Solidarity economy, climate jobs, basic income grant, all the ideas that people have been talking about. If we dream for one moment, if one of those ideas was implemented over the past 26 years, none of them have been, but if just one of those ideas was implemented, we would have a qualitatively different society. If the ANC got public transport rights, this would have been a revolution in South Africa. But they never did, and they're not going to get it right. I'm sorry. Okay? But I'm just saying that these alternatives need to come to the fore, and they need to come to the fore now. Otherwise, we end up hopeless. Otherwise, we end up disarmed. Otherwise, we end up talking the language of the other side. We are ideologically confused, and so on. We must champion people's alternatives in these spaces, in these moments. We must also, if you like, also use and construct our own news. And we've been doing that for 5 years in our climate, in our food sovereignty campaigning. We've been taking the use of Twitter seriously. We've been taking Facebook seriously. We've brought the media in. We brought the media much closer to us now. And we have a whole network of journalists that we will be working with as we go forward. Okay? But we mustn't rely on them to tell the story. We must also tell our own story. The other point is this: in our research, in preparation for this, there is a government web page, and it's called sarkis.environment.gov.za. And basically, if you go onto this web page, you'll actually find that it provides for you to log a complaint about air pollution. And so we are saying that on September 20th, when we are all gathered in our assemblies outside these targets, we must all get onto this web page and log complaints about pollution. Let us swarm the government web page and let us draw attention to where the pollution hotspots are. And then, of course, we are also saying that we must reach out to international climate justice forces. Now, this is not just things coming from the global north, it's also from the global south. And we need to be putting this forward more and more. And what is the idea? If we target SASOL, this is very, very important. We must call on climate justice forces in the United States, the Sunrise Movement, etc., to block SASOL's investment in the United States. It's the Lake Charles Petrochemicals Complex. SASOL is bleeding money because it's a bad investment, okay? And it's a big petrochemical plant that will have massive implications for carbon pollution. We must call upon the American climate justice movement to gridlock this and to ask SASOL to leave the United States. Similarly, SASOL is heavily invested in Mozambique. Mozambique has some of the largest gas fields in southern Africa. SASOL has a key foothold in those gas fields. It is now poised to expand its investments in the Mozambique gas field. Now, we know what's happened with Idai and Kenneth and the cyclones. Essentially, the more SASOL deepens these investments, the more carbon extraction is going to happen, the more carbon pollution, the more extreme weather. So we need to call on the forces on our continent, and particularly Mozambique, to ask SASOL to withdraw its investments, okay? To end extraction and to leave carbon in the ground. We're also saying we need a social media strategy, and we will provide an infrastructure and platform for that, which we've been using for the past 5 years. But we're saying let's retweet, let's use our hashtags, etc. We are also saying that the national focus will be organized by COPAC and a student-led activist forum that we'll be convening at WITS, and we'll be also inviting in other social, environmental, climate justice organizations in Gauteng. We're also providing a 6-point plan for you to work on wherever you are. Convene a local meeting, use the fact sheet which will be available, identify carbon polluters in your area, draw down the national pamphlet and posters, develop your own non-violent action plan for September 20th, communicate the plan of contact to us and to your community through local radio, etc. Take pictures of your action, etc., etc. So in short, comrades, we want to leave this meeting now with a very firm and a solid consensus that's grounded in a South African focus, in a South African narrative, and in a united approach to what happens on September 20th. And this is the proposal we are bringing to you. We really want to create the context for you now to break up into groups, to deliberate on this, to share with us also what you are doing, and to find a place for all of this within this broad framework. But this is the direction we're going to be moving in, and this is the direction we're going to be announcing after this workshop, and this is how we're going to be mobilizing, and this is what we're going to be taking into our engagement with other mass forces in this country who trust us, who know us, who we've been working with for many, many years. And we're going to be working with those forces in a disciplined way, in a way that's respectful, that deepens that trust. And I think a message coming from children in this meeting and from young people will add to the weight to carry those forces. Amandla.
Thank you, Vish. So we're going to break up into different groups.
Just gonna stop this.